Commissioner Gordon. Bane has escaped.
There's a moment, always a moment, where instinct speaks. It's not loud, it's not poetic, it just knows. But you don't act. You wait, you analyze, you dissect. You rerun the options through a mental maze until clarity turns into confusion. What started as a signal becomes static. What was once motion becomes paralysis. You call it caution. You call it intelligence. But let's name it for what it is. Fear, dressed in thought. You are not planning. You are delaying. And while you sit in the false safety of analysis, life moves on without you. Overthinking seduces you with the illusion of control. You think that if you can anticipate every outcome, you can outmaneuver pain, outmaneuver rejection, outmaneuver regret. But control is a ghost. It vanishes the moment you try to hold it. Action is the only real power, and action does not wait for complete certainty. It doesn't need all the pieces in place. It doesn't beg for guarantees. It simply moves through fear, through doubt, through chaos, because it understands the truth. Nothing changes until you do. Nothing evolves until you leap. And no thought, no matter how refined, will save you from the leap that must be taken. There are two lives inside you, the one you think about and the one you live. And for most, those two never touch. They dream but never do. They plan but never build. They imagine but never execute. Why? Because the brain won't shut up. It keeps asking questions that have no answers. What if I fail? What if I'm judged? What if this is the wrong move? But here's the real question. What if you never move at all? What if the thing that destroys you isn't failure, but stagnation? What if overthinking is the slowest suicide there is? You've mistaken stillness for safety, but stillness, when rooted in fear, is decay. Your body was meant to move. Your mind was meant to solve. Your spirit was meant to stretch. But when you feed it doubt, when you loop the same question 1,000 times, you're not feeding your intelligence. You're starving your potential. Every second spent overthinking is a second robbed from doing. And the clock does not refund that time. It buries it quietly, without mercy, without apology. The voice in your head will always sound convincing. That's the trap. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It makes hesitation feel noble, like you're being responsible, careful, strategic. But you're not. You're just afraid to move without applause, afraid to start without certainty, afraid to be seen learning in real time. But that's the only way anything real is built. Through messy beginnings, through wrong turns, through decisions that don't work out. You can't think your way into the person you were meant to become. You must act your way there. People talk about burnout, but the real burnout, it's mental, emotional. It's thinking so much that your will evaporates. It's staying up late with scenarios that never happen. It's draining yourself with imagined failures. You wake up exhausted, not because of work, but because you've been at war with yourself. Every decision becomes a battleground. Every opportunity becomes a threat. Overthinking doesn't protect you. It bleeds you, slowly, relentlessly, until there's nothing left but what-ifs and wasted time. And worst of all, overthinking makes you a ghost in your own life. You're present, but you're not alive. You're in the room, but you're not in the moment. Conversations feel distant. Work feels hollow. Dreams feel far away. Because your mind is always elsewhere, running simulations that lead nowhere. Life becomes a hallway of unopened doors, all because you couldn't silence the voice that said, "Wait, wait, wait." But what if waiting is the mistake? What if the real courage is found in interrupting that voice and doing it anyway? The path out is not mental, it's physical. Movement breaks the loop. Decision shatters paralysis. Start small. Say yes, say no, but say something. Pick a direction. Choose a project, make a call, move. Because once you move, the brain has no choice but to follow. You remind it who's in control. You remind it that fear is not the final voice. That instinct still matters. That momentum is louder than hesitation. And over time, the loop weakens. The noise fades. The clarity returns. Overthinking will always wait for you. It's patient. It will sneak in again. But now you know the weapon. Movement. Momentum. Action without a perfect plan. Because the truth is, perfection is paralysis. You will never be ready. You will never be sure. But you can still choose. You can still begin. You can still escape. One step, one task, one risk over and over, until motion becomes your new mind. Overthinking is not reflection. It's self-inflicted paralysis. Reflection is structured, it's surgical, it's intentional. You look at the event, extract the lesson, then move forward. It is finite. It has a beginning, middle, and end. But overthinking, that is something else entirely. It's endless looping. It's taking a moment and turning it into a prison cell. You replay, reanalyze, reroute, looking for some angle, some twist, some perfect response that doesn't exist. You wear the moment down, like a blade across stone, not to sharpen it, but to destroy it. The problem with overthinking is that it masquerades as intelligence. It looks like strategy. It feels like preparation. But what it really is fear. Fear of movement, fear of consequence, fear of blame. Overthinking is the art of hesitation perfected. You tell yourself you're just being thorough, that you're planning all possibilities, but what you're really doing is running from the responsibility of choice. Because if you choose, and it fails, it's yours. That's what terrifies you. So you build scenarios, you create endless simulations, but none of them set you free. None of them move you forward. You think you're driving toward clarity, but clarity isn't found in circling. It's found in deciding. You're not a strategist when you're overthinking. You're a fugitive, hiding in your own mind, avoiding action by flooding it with noise. The great myth of overthinking is that it sharpens decision-making. But the truth is, the longer you linger in thought, the duller your instincts become. The brain needs pressure. It needs deadlines. It needs friction. You sharpen your instincts by doing, not by spiraling in internal dialogues. Decisions refine your judgment. Motion improves your calibration. But overthinking dulls everything. It builds hesitation into your reflexes. And by the time you finally decide, the moment that mattered is long gone. There is a reason you don't trust yourself anymore. A reason you ask others what they would do. It's because you've trained yourself to ignore your gut. Every time you had an instinct and paused to overanalyze it, you buried your inner compass under another layer of second-guessing. And now, when you hear that whisper, the one that used to guide you, you can't tell if it's wisdom or fear. Overthinking doesn't just delay action, it kills self-trust. It convinces you that every step forward is a trap, that every instinct must be audited, that certainty is arrogance, but certainty is not arrogance. It is action without apology, and you must earn it back. The tragedy is that most people will never know how much life they forfeited to overthinking. Because there's no memorial for hesitation. There's no obituary for unrealized potential. No one eulogizes the man who almost did the thing, but look around. The world is full of silent regret. Projects never built, words never said, opportunities never taken, all sacrificed on the altar of what if. And for what? So you could feel safe in a reality that no longer challenges you? So you could maintain the illusion of control while quietly decaying behind indecision? You weren't made to hesitate. You were made to engage, to try, to fail, to learn, and yes, to reflect. But reflect doesn't mean loop. It doesn't mean overstay your welcome in a single moment. Reflection means examine, extract, evolve, not obsess, not replay, not refeel pain that already passed through you. You've got to reclaim your mental bandwidth. Pull yourself out of the endless rehearsal and walk into the real scene. Because the real thing, that's where the learning happens. That's where clarity sharpens. That's where life gets loud again. People glorify thinking as if it's the highest form of power. But power is not thought. Power is thought followed by execution. Precision of mind combined with force of action. That's where transformation lives. The greatest minds in history were not great because they thought more. They were great because they acted on what they thought. Their ideas were useless until they risked failure by executing. And their first attempts? Often terrible. But they didn't sit with those failures for years, analyzing what went wrong. They noted it, corrected it, and kept moving. Motion is the only feedback loop that matters. You think the danger is in choosing wrong, but the real danger is in choosing nothing. Because decisions, even flawed ones, create momentum. They create data. They create clarity. Overthinking freezes the world. It creates a personal purgatory. No movement. No progress. Just endless mental noise. And it makes your entire existence feel like you're underwater, moving but not going anywhere. You wake up tired. You sleep without peace. You carry the weight of everything you didn't do. And every day it grows heavier. Escape is not found in figuring it all out. Escape is found in doing something. One action, one move. Break the loop. Choose the hard path. Speak the hard truth. Take the imperfect shot. And then do it again. Because once you act, the brain shuts up. It watches. It learns. It recalibrates based on reality, not imagination. You weren't meant to drown in thoughts. Your mind can be a prison or a weapon. Overthinking chooses the former and convinces you that safety lies in imagining every possible doom. You sit still, eyes wide open, staring into the theater of your fears. You replay scenarios, you forecast pain, you simulate rejection. And every time you survive a new nightmare in your head, you feel like you've prepared. But you haven't prepared. You've surrendered. Not to the world, not to reality, but to the idea that thinking is safer than moving. You've mistaken fear for foresight, caution for clarity. And the bars of that prison are not steel, they're imagined. Crafted from projections that never happened. Crafted from ghosts you invited in. The mind in its highest form is a forge. A place where ideas take shape, where vision becomes architecture, where decisions are made with precision. But overthinking douses that fire in hesitation. It floods the forge with fog. Instead of shaping the world, you shape scenarios. You become the architect of your own paralysis. Every room you enter, you've already filled with failure. Every conversation you consider, you've already ended it in your mind. Every ambition dies before it breathes, smothered in thought. Not because it lacked potential, but because you overfed it with imagined consequences. There's a dark comfort in overthinking, a cruel one. It lets you feel productive. You pace, you analyze, you feel the burn of mental activity. And so you tell yourself you're working, but nothing changes. You haven't stepped forward. You haven't risked anything real. You're safe inside the boundaries of your mind, watching versions of your life collapse before they begin. It's emotional masochism disguised as strategy, and it numbs you, not all at once, but slowly. The pain becomes familiar. The fear becomes a routine, and that routine becomes your identity. You begin to identify with the loop. You no longer see yourself as a man who acts, who adapts, who builds. You see yourself as a man who thinks. But thought, divorced from movement, is the slowest form of death. It feels intelligent, even noble. You start to believe that the depth of your thinking justifies the lack of your progress. You convince yourself that others are reckless, that their action is flawed because yours is still in progress. But the truth? The man who moves, even if imperfectly, will always outpace the man who lives in mental rehearsal. The mind, when sharpened, is lethal. It cuts through confusion, it slices through noise. It makes fast, clean decisions and lives with the consequence. But overthinking dulls it. You blunt the blade every time you revisit a decision without new data. Every time you think in circles instead of lines. Every time you demand certainty from a world built on chaos. The weapon becomes a cage, and soon you forget it was ever meant to be anything else. You forget that you were not born to hesitate. You were born to advance. Most don't even know they're trapped. That's the cruel brilliance of overthinking. It mimics intelligence, it feeds the ego. It makes you feel superior because you see more angles. But seeing more is not the same as doing more. Knowing all the outcomes doesn't make you courageous. It makes you anxious. It makes you risk-averse. The longer you see the battlefield without stepping on it, the more terrifying it looks. And eventually, the war isn't outside of you, it's entirely within. You don't fight the world, you fight your thoughts. And that's a war no one wins. You think safety is found in avoiding pain, but safety is found in building the capacity to move through it. That's what overthinking steals from you. It steals your edge, your timing, your momentum. You begin life as a warrior, moving with instinct, adapting with speed. But over time, hesitation creeps in, and one delay becomes 2, one doubt becomes 10, until your blade is sheathed for good, and all you're left with is commentary. You become a spectator in your own arena, watching the versions of you that could have been, if only you had acted. But it's not too late, because the mind that traps can also liberate. The weapon is still there. It's under the dust of delay. It's buried beneath the routines of avoidance. But it remembers how to strike, and it will sharpen again if you let it. If you act before the thought finishes. If you walk before the fear completes its sentence. If you recondition your mind to move first and reflect second, that is the path. That is the design. The brain follows action, not the other way around. Escape isn't about solving the maze. It's about stepping out of it, breaking the cycle, choosing movement over meaning. You can't think your way to a better life. You can only build it. Thought supports action. It does not replace it. Your salvation is found in execution, in the doing, in the messy, painful, beautiful business of becoming. And the moment you realize that, the cage vanishes. The longer you sit with the thought, the louder it lies. It doesn't start as a lie. It starts as a whisper, a soft signal from somewhere inside you, a concern, a hesitation, a pattern you've noticed. But you don't move on it. You sit with it. You examine it. Then you examine your examination. The thought becomes a maze. each wall lined with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. Every time you turn, you find a new angle, a new doubt, and eventually the original signal, the useful thread, gets buried under layers of distortion. Now the thought isn't guiding you, it's deceiving you. It's inflated, warped, twisted into a monster that never existed. You think you're uncovering truth. You're building fiction, one that sounds real because you've repeated it too many times to doubt it. Thoughts are meant to pass through you, not nest inside you, not grow roots in your mind and expand until they choke the space for clarity. When a thought first hits, it contains data, insight, signal. But the more time you give it without action, the more space it takes to rewrite itself. It shifts from observation to prophecy. Suddenly, you're not considering an outcome. You're predicting your downfall. And you believe it. Not because it's true, but because you've allowed repetition without resolution. That's what overthinking is. Thought without closure. Awareness without execution. A loop that eats your time, your energy, your identity. Clarity was never born in stillness. It was born in motion. It doesn't emerge from endless contemplation. It emerges when the boots hit the ground, when the hand touches the craft, when the words hit the page. The problem with modern thought is that it stays in the head too long. Never tested, never moved, never given the tension of action to show its worth. And so, it mutates. The simple decision turns complex. The instinctive idea becomes theoretical. And the man with clarity becomes the man with doubt. Not because of what happened externally, but because of how long he sat with it, feeding it without confronting it. The longer you wait, the more that thought takes ownership of you. It doesn't ask permission. It settles in. Like a squatter in a house you forgot to lock. It begins to color every other thought. Every new possibility is filtered through it. And now, you're not living. You're managing mental narratives. You're spinning plates of imagined consequences. And every time you try to act, that bloated thought pulls you back. Reminds you of all the reasons not to. Not now, not yet. Not until it feels right. But it never feels right. Because fear doesn't leave through logic. It leaves through movement. You don't solve these thoughts by thinking harder. That's what most get wrong. They think one more hour of consideration will bring clarity. One more journal session. One more conversation. But thought without motion is like inhaling without ever exhaling. You choke. You overload. You stall. Real clarity is kinetic. It happens while building, while testing, while failing, while breathing into discomfort. Your job is not to predict every outcome. Your job is to act and adjust. The map you drew in your head is useless until your feet touch the terrain. Most never touch the terrain. They become cartographers of the mind, drawing perfect mental plans, writing beautiful scripts in their imagination, but none of it matters. Because clarity doesn't reward thought, it rewards confrontation. The first representative, the first attempt, the first move that tells your mind, we are not slaves to speculation. We don't worship the thought. We use it, and then we move. Otherwise, your mind will convince you that danger is everywhere, that you are unprepared, that your moment has not yet arrived. That's the voice of the lie. And the longer you sit, the louder it screams. Thinking has a half-life. After a certain point, it rots. It decays into insecurity, into fiction, into inertia. Your best ideas will expire if they're not acted on. You'll forget why they even mattered, or worse, you'll remember them and hate yourself for not beginning. That's the cruel reward of overthinking. It robs you of time, then makes you pay again with regret. And all of it, every ounce, could have been redirected into forward motion, into doing, into becoming. But you chose to sit, and the thought grew teeth. The cure is simpler than you want it to be. You act, not with certainty, not with confidence, but with force. You take the step without knowing if it's right. You do the thing without proof. You begin without applause. Because that movement slashes through the fog. It reveals the lie. It shows you that the monsters in your head were just shadows of inaction. And once you see that, you remember who you are. You remember the clarity doesn't visit the idle. It visits the ones who dare to move before they feel ready. And motion is how you escape. Because overthinking will ruin your life unless you move faster than the doubt it creates.